Gene Simmons regrets not staging an intervention for Ace Frehley decades ago. This is the Rock and Roll Weatherman. My name is Sean Morrison. He says it was a stupid and shameful decision on all our parts. And of course, that is the Kiss bassist, Mr. Gene Simmons. In an interview he did with Inside of You with Mr. Michael Rosenbaum, which is a podcast, he was asked if he had any good conversations with the late Kiss guitarist, Ace Frehley, before he passed away at the age of 74. And Gene goes on to say, it's been up and down for 50 years with Ace, and the fans would often hate him for telling the truth. That's what Gene said in this podcast. He goes, when the kids are at home and there's mom and dad, and all of a sudden dad gets thrown out of the house, the kids don't understand. They love mom and dad. Why mom kicked dad out of the house? And she tries to explain to them he was a drunk, he was a loser, he was late, didn't show up on time, didn't do what he was supposed to do, was barely around the kids, but he's your father. And the fans are like kids, they don't know. That's what Gene said. And he continued to say, if you met Ace at the beginning of Kiss, God bless him, you would have fallen in love with the idea of who he is and all that. And then Niccolo Machiavelli said, when you have power, you must sometimes abuse it. It all affects us in different ways. He says also him too as well. But Ace turned to beverages and chemicals. Early on, he wouldn't show up. He said he wouldn't even show up to do his guitar parts, even on Destroyer early on. And the fans don't like to hear this because he's so talented. And everybody, all the new guitar players, were influenced by him in that. Yeah, but when you're together in a band, and you're together more time than your family members or your wife and kids, so he'd be late and all this stuff. And Peter Criss, we love him and God bless him. He's still around. But really, from the early days, as soon as the money and the fame came in, it was like the dark cloud came over, and they were both in and out of the band 3 separate times, and the fans just couldn't understand that. Offering an example of how unreliable Ace Frehley was, Gene Simmons says they were doing a Eurovision contest. They were the headliners. People in America didn't know what this is, but 600 million people at the time, now 1 billion people, turned into Eurovision, where all the countries in the world basically send their representatives, and it's music-based. It's one of those times that a large audience in the early days would tune in. Ace didn't show up. They had to do it as a trio, and it just went on and on. Ace, and had we not been as popular, we would have asked Ace to leave, but strangely, the first time Ace left, he turned to us and said, and in quote, it said to me twice, I'm leaving the band, I'm going to have a solo career, and we tried to talk to him. He says he knows he did in front of the manager and everyone else. Stay in the band, have your solo career, have your cake and eat too. We don't want anything from you. If you're not happy, do other stuff, but don't break up the band. It's lunacy. He just never made smart decisions. So he said on the way out, you just watch, I'm going to sell 10 million copies of my solo record. That's a quote. And we said, no, don't do that. Just stay in the band. And he said more than once, if I don't leave the band and if I do another tour, I'm just going to kill myself. So whatever was going on, it breaks your heart. Very sad. And then Gene goes on to say that despite Ace's issues with substance abuse, he was one of the most influential guitarists of his era. Some of these guitar players, Eddie Van Halen to the kids from Metallica, God, I just forgot they point to Ace. He even mentioned Tom Morello, even though I can't stand Tom Morello. This Mr. Morrison can't stand Tom Morello. They said they cut their teeth listening to Ace. And he was so proud and happy to hear from the White House, not from the president, that Kiss had won the Kennedy Center honors. And he looked so much forward to being honored, etc. And he said, was also asked what he would tell Ace Frehley now if he had a chance to address him. He said, and he should have a long time ago, when you see the disease starting to get a hold of him, he should have said that, took him aside and called it intervention and forced him to understand it's not just hurting himself by his life choices, but it's his family, his child, and the fans. Stupid and shameful decision on all their parts, his as well. You don't want to get the fans upset and make believe everything's okay. And the band, he goes home, and it's tough, really tough. Friends, if you're not subscribed to the Sean Morrison YouTube channel, please do so. Everyone else has to subscribe. We thank you much for the continued love and support. It's greatly appreciated. Also, Gene goes on to say right now, the fans who are going to continue to listen to this are going to say, prick Gene never says anything positive. Hey, listen, he tries to say stuff positive, but he's just calling it as it is. I know that people are going to be like, all right, he's passed away. Why is he doing it? He has a right to say what he has to say, You don't have to always agree with it. I'm not saying I agree with everything Gene Simmons does. I understand what he why he said this in this in this interview, we got to ask this question. So, friends, what do you think about Gene Simmons regretting not staging an intervention with Ace Frehley decades ago, and going on to say it was a stupid and shameful decision from all their parts? And you can check out the Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum podcast on. You can check it on Inside of You on the YouTube channel and then there's /com. /podcast Inside of You /podcast when you first go youtube.com, or you can check the channel out there, or if you just want to see the interview and read it, just go to blabmouth.net where Mr. Morrison's reading it. So once again, your thoughts, friends. Mr. Simmons had to say. Leave your comments here. Shame, shame, shame.